It's great to have you join us this morning. It is Monday, 21st of May. Live from Seoul, I'm Shin Se-min, and these are the stories we're following at this hour. South Korea and the U.S. are working closely on their summit after Pyongyang's about-face last week. President Moon leaves for Washington later today for crunch talks with President Trump. Now this after the two held phone discussions in a bid to ensure the North Korea-U.S. summit remains on track. Despite North Korea's refusal to accept their visa applications, 8 South Korean journalists leave for Beijing, their first stop before heading to the north to watch the dismantlement of the Punggye-ri nuclear test site. Iran's top diplomat demands that the European Union do more to salvage the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, currently in limbo after President Trump yanked the U.S. out of the deal. We start this morning with a diplomatic drive to get Pyongyang to abandon its nuclear weapons program. South Korean President Moon Jae-in is leaving for Washington in the coming hours to meet with his U.S. counterpart ahead of the next month's highly anticipated North Korea-U.S. summit. Now, before their fifth face-to-face, the two leaders spoke on the phone to ensure that the Singapore summit stays on track. Our Moon Gun-young starts us off.
In just 2 days, they'll be meeting in person in Washington, but perhaps reflecting how serious and alarming the two leaders are taking the latest about-face by North Korea. Presidents Moon and Trump picked up the phone on this Sunday to ensure they're both committed to success with North Korea-U.S. summit. That's after the North threatened to pull out of what would be an unprecedented summit next month. Seoul's presidential Blue House said the two leaders spoke over the phone for about 20 minutes and exchanged views on various actions taken by North Korea lately.
The two leaders will work closely and unwaveringly for the successful hosting of the North Korea-U.S. summit set for June 12th, including the upcoming South Korea-U.S. summit.
Mr. Moon is due to fly out to Washington Monday afternoon for an exclusive one-on-one with Mr. Trump on Tuesday, where the two leaders will hold private talks with only their interpreters present. It'll be the first meeting between the two allies since a historic inter-Korean summit in April, and potentially the last before the landmark North Korea-U.S. summit in June. With Presidents Moon and Trump's pledge Sunday to closely work together on the issue, analysts expect the leaders to share their deepest thoughts on South Korea-U.S. cooperation in the denuclearization journey and joint efforts to lead North Korea to the negotiations table come June 12th. Moon Gun-young, Arirang News, The Blue House.
Now, it was this week that North Korea promised to invite reporters from 5 countries to watch the dismantlement of its nuclear test site in Punggye-ri. And the first batch of South Korean reporters left for Beijing this morning for a stopover before hopefully taking the short flight to the north. But they are traveling under a cloud of uncertainty as the regime has not changed its stance on refusing to accept South Korean journalists' visa applications, a must for them to enter North Korea to cover the event. For more on this latest development, we connect live to our Lee Ji-won, who is standing by for us at Seoul's Foreign Ministry. Ji-won, so still no word from North Korea.
No, not yet. Seoul's Unification Ministry sent a list of reporters to the north once again this morning for their confirmation, but still no response. As for the reporters who left this morning, 4 South Korean reporters from news agency News One arrived in Beijing moments ago. The second batch of broadcast reporters are to leave Seoul in the afternoon. Those already in Beijing are expected to contact the North Korean embassy in Beijing to try and get a visa for their travel to the north on Tuesday. But whether or not they will actually be given a visa remains up in the air, as the North did not accept the list of South Korean reporters or questions on how the event will be arranged, which were delivered through the Panmunjom channel late last week. The sudden rift between the two Koreas comes despite the recent reconciliatory mood. It appears to be due to South Korea-U.S. joint military drills and a former North Korean diplomat who defected to the South, openly criticizing the regime last week at South Korea's National Assembly.
So the South Korean reporters are still in limbo, but there are other journalists coming in from other countries like the U.S., China, Russia, and the U.K. Have they been given the green light?
Yes, Taemin, what we know so far is that reporters from ABC and CNN were asked by the North to gather at the North Korean embassy in Beijing on Tuesday morning. If all goes as planned, the reporters are expected to leave for North Korea's Wonsan Galma Airport by a chartered plane on Tuesday. Wonsan is where the reporters will have their accommodation, and there will also be a press center there. From Wonsan, the reporters will take a train to get to the test site, which could take place any day between Wednesday to Friday. Reporters are expected to leave North Korea on Saturday or Sunday. Meanwhile, U.S.-based North Korean monitoring website 38 North reports that the dismantling of the test site has begun. According to satellite images, 38 North says several key operational support buildings have been raised, and some of the rails for the mining carts that go in and out of the tunnels have also been removed. Back to you, Taemin.
Thank you, our Iji-won at the Foreign Ministry for us. Moving on, Japan has been busy meeting with the member nations of the six-party talks amid fears it could be left out of the negotiations on the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Aiming to meet with all of the concerned parties, with the exception of Pyongyang, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is due to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin in the coming days. Our Kim Hyo-sun has more.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will visit Moscow later this week to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Abe's scheduled visit on May 26th will be an opportunity for him to personally congratulate Putin on his fourth term, but most importantly, it will be a chance for him to discuss the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula with the Russian leader. Tokyo has called for a complete and irreversible dismantlement of North Korea's nuclear programs, while Moscow continues to insist that this is something which cannot be achieved in a short time frame. Once Abe sits down with Putin, he will have discussed the denuclearization issue with all of the countries of the six-party talks, excluding North Korea.
North Korea must show actions towards denuclearization. I discussed this issue with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang and South Korean President Moon Jae-in.
Following a summit with U.S. President Donald Trump last month, Abe is making efforts to sit down with him once again on the sidelines of the G7 summit to be held in Canada early next month. Watchers also expect Abe will even fly to Singapore following the North Korea-U.S. summit to hear the results of the talks directly from President Trump. While Abe has looked for ways to engage in dialogue with Pyongyang by bringing up the issue of Japanese abductees in the north, the regime has firmly rejected such overtures. Tokyo is currently exerting every effort not to be excluded from the denuclearization talks, and is especially preparing for a possible multilateral discussion among the countries of the six-party talks. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
It was just over the weekend that U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said the brewing trade war with China was, quote, on hold. Now this after the two sides set up a framework for addressing trade imbalances in the future. For more on what this means and its impact, we have our business correspondent Kim Hae-sung live with me in studio. So Hae-sung, just give us a rundown of what was agreed between the world's two economic superpowers.
Yes, after months of tensions, the United States and China have agreed to substantially reduce the U.S. trade deficit with China. The two countries also agreed to meaningful increases of U.S. agriculture and energy exports and greater efforts to increase trade in manufactured goods and services. In the joint statement released on Saturday after 2 days of talks in Washington led by U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and China's State Council Vice Premier and President Xi Jinping's Special Envoy Liu He, both sides agreed to encourage two-day investment and to strive to create a fair, level playing field for competition with Beijing, saying it would make structural changes to its economy. Mnuchin said in an interview with Fox News on Sunday that, quote, "We are putting the trade war on hold. We have agreed to put the tariffs on hold while we try to execute the framework." This echoes remarks by China Vice Premier Liu He, who said the two sides have pledged not to engage in a trade war and called the joint statement a good example of a win-win outcome. Take a listen.
This round of talks have been pragmatic, fruitful, and efficient. We reached many agreements. These meetings will not just help bilateral economic and trade relations and build overall ties. It's good for people in both countries. It's also sending a positive signal to the whole world.
Now, such a thawing of tensions between the two sides coming after Chinese economic chiefs and its member delegations have visited Washington, vice versa from the Trump administration as well. And we can also speak at length about their exchange of trips, but how significant would you consider this agreement between the two?
Well, remember Trump administration's tariffs on steel and aluminum back in March. So the deadline for the imposition of tariffs is just around the corner as early as next week. If implemented, it could have triggered a full-blown trade war. Leading up to the talks, President Trump had threatened to impose tariffs on up to $150 billion in Chinese imports to punish Beijing for violating U.S. intellectual property and for its unfair trade practices. China hit back, vowing to retaliate with tariffs of 25% on over 100 U.S. goods from soybeans to airplanes. This whole tit-for-tat weighed on global financial markets, with the IMF warning that a global trade war would undermine the broadest global upswing in years. And of course, it was also considered a downside risk to South Korea's export-oriented economy, according to the Bank of Korea. So the fact that a trade war has been averted is good news, especially after the first trade talks held in Beijing earlier this month only ended in differences and alleged reports of disagreements among the U.S. trade representatives. Plus, peaceful relations with China could give President Trump a smooth run-up to his summit talks with North Korea slated for June.
So the agreement is now in place. What now?
Well, experts say the outcome is generally positive, but many point out that the agreement lacks specifics, especially on U.S. intellectual property or the treatment of Chinese tech giant ZTE, a sticking point between the two countries. In the statement, they just agreed to strengthen cooperation on IP protections and that China will advance amendments to its patent laws. There is also no dollar figure attached to the U.S. trade deficit with China. Just before the second trade talks, both countries were sharply at odds over a claim made by White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow, who said China would slash its trade deficit with the U.S. by $200 billion by 2020. That characterization was disputed by Chinese officials. So the fundamental differences on trade and other economic issues remain unresolved. The U.S. plans to send a team led by Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross to China to hammer out the details. So we'll have to see how that goes. A trade war has been averted, but there may be frictions along the way.
So we'll still have to keep an eye on the two sides as we go on. Thank you, Ha-sung, for that coverage.
My pleasure, Semin.
South Korea's National Assembly will be holding a plenary session this morning to vote on two highly contested bills, the extra budget and a bill that calls for a special probe into an online opinion rigging scandal. It is long overdue, but rival political parties have finally reached an agreement on the specifics of the bills after marathon negotiations through last week and over the weekend. For more on this development, we connect live to our political correspondent, Kim Min-ji, who was at the National Assembly for us. Min-ji, so has the plenary session begun as planned?
Simon, the plenary session has yet to convene, but when it does, rival parties will be voting on the government's extra budget, as well as a bill that calls for a special probe into an online opinion rigging scandal. Now, rival parties had agreed to hold the session at 10 a.m. today, given deliberations of both bills are both complete. Now, the plenary session had initially been rescheduled twice before being called off, as rival parties were at odds over the specifics of the $3.6 billion extra budget bill. Now, after fine-tuning the details until late Sunday night, a subcommittee passed the revised version, which is roughly $20 million less than the initial proposal, and the Budget Committee this morning also approved the revised version. Now, this comes over 40 days after the government submitted its proposal in early April. Now, rival parties have also reached an agreement over the details of the special probe. There will be a preparation period of 20 days, while the actual probe itself will last for 60 days. That's subject to a one-time extension of 30 days. As for the independent council that will lead the probe, the Korean Bar Association will recommend 4 candidates, of which the opposition bloc will select 2, while the final pick will be made by the president. On the team will also be 3 assistants to the independent council and 13 prosecutors. Now, to give you a recap of the opinion ranking scandal, it revolves around a blogger with alleged ties with a former ruling party lawmaker who is known to have used a computer program to manipulate internet comments on political news articles. And there's also growing speculation that the blogger may have been engaged in rigging activities in the run-up to last year's presidential election. Now, the parties had agreed to vote on both issues at the same time as part of a compromise to end 6 weeks of inactivity. Hopefully, I'll have some positive results in our later newscast. Back to you, Zamin.
Thank you, our Kim Min-ji at the National Assembly. Shifting focus, South Korea's producer prices rose slightly last month, recording 18 months of consecutive gain, mostly on the back of rising oil prices. According to data by Bank of Korea this Monday, the producer price index, a leading indicator of consumer inflation, stood at 104.13 in April, up 0.5% from the previous month. The central bank attributed the increase to the global upward trend of crude oil prices. LG Group Chairman Koo Bon-moo, who led the nation's 4th largest conglomerate, passed away over the weekend, and he was 73 years old. As well as being known for his key role in LG's many successes, he's also remembered for his human-centered management. Our Lee Seung-jae tells us more.
Koo Bon-moo died on Sunday after undergoing multiple brain surgeries in recent years. While the nation mourns the loss of one of the pioneers in the nation's electronics industry, many are remembering the legacy he leaves. Koo, the oldest grandson of LG Group's co-founder Koo In-hye, began working in 1975 for the Lockheed Chemical Industrial Corporation, now known as LG Chemicals, and started making cosmetics before expanding into plastics and household products such as toothpaste. Koo Bon-moo would move up the corporate ladder quickly before being named LG Group Chairman in 1995. Under Koo's 23-year leadership, the Korean home appliance maker became one of the world's top 5 phone brands, and its LCD business is now neck and neck with Samsung Electronics. LG Group sales also increased more than 5-folds to $148 billion in 2017, from $27 billion in 1994. Under Koo's stewardship, LG's overseas sales also increased 10-fold to $102 billion during the same period. Despite helping the company grow into one of the world's biggest electronics giants, Koo is widely remembered for his integrity and human-centered management. In fact, during the Chaesunshil power abuse scandal, which saw a number of Korean conglomerates questioned by the prosecution, LG was excluded. And according to a survey released this month by the Korea CSR Research Center, LG Group topped the list among local conglomerates, both for credibility concerning the business itself and the integrity of the owner family. Based on his philosophy, Koo had always been keen on attracting talent and investing in long-term research and development. Koo is also remembered for his treatment of employees, regardless of their backgrounds and educational prestige, creating a fair corporate culture. An example of his beliefs was LG Electronics Vice President Cho Sang-jin, who became the first high school graduate to become a top LG Group executive. With his passing on Sunday, the torch will now be passed to his adopted son, Koo Kwang-mo, who was recently nominated to the board of LG Corporation last Thursday. His funeral will be quiet and simple, just like he was as the chairman, soft-spoken and humble. His New Year's address from last year sums up his legacy. Let us earn respect from the people and society. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And now for a look at stories making headlines around the world. Iran's foreign minister has called on the EU to do more in its push to salvage the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, saying its efforts so far are insufficient. For more on this and other news around the world, we turn to our Arirang at the News Center. Arirang, so ever since the U.S. pulled out of the agreement, Iran has been looking to the EU to save it, but now it seems Tehran is losing hope in Europe as well.
That's right, Simon. The main concern for Iran is how its economy will be affected by America's withdrawal from the 2015 nuclear deal. Washington has said it would reimpose sanctions on Iran, including ones aimed at the country's oil and financial sectors. EU leaders have pledged to try to keep Iran's oil trade and investment flowing, but have noted that it would not be easy. However, Iran's foreign minister doesn't seem to be satisfied with their efforts, saying European political support for the accord was, quote, not sufficient. Mohammed Javad Zarif made the comments on Sunday during a meeting with the EU's energy chief, Miguel Arias-Cañete, in Tehran. He added the possible withdrawal by major European companies from their cooperation with Iran is not consistent with the EU's commitment to implementing the nuclear deal. Several European firms suggested last week that their business in Iran would be restricted or even end completely due to the reimposition of US sanctions. Zarif went on to say the bloc should take more practical steps and increase its investments in Iran, as well as preserve oil trade. Cañete responded by pledging to preserve the nuclear pact and continue cooperation between the EU and Iran. Lava spewing from a continuously erupting volcano in Hawaii has blocked a highway that serves as a major evacuation route. The first serious injury has also been reported as Mount Kilauea becomes more violent. A man sitting on a balcony was hit in the leg by a projectile of molten rock, otherwise known as lava splatter. Some are said to weigh as much as a refrigerator. The lava stream, meanwhile, has blocked Highway 137 and threatens to make other escape routes inaccessible. It is also flowing into the ocean, prompting warnings of lays, which are clouds of hydrochloric acid and steam filled with fine glass particles formed when hot lava hits ocean water. French scientists claim they have put an end to conspiracy theories surrounding Adolf Hitler's death after studying his teeth. The researchers were given rare access to the Nazi leader's teeth, which have been held in Moscow since the end of the Second World War. They said the teeth were authentic, citing comparisons with Hitler's dental records and that they had no traces of meat. Despite his murderous nature, Hitler was a vegetarian. Various conspiracy theorists have claimed Hitler was still alive, with some saying he fled to Argentina with his wife and others claiming possible sightings of him up until the 1980s.
Good morning. Today is Soman, the start of the second part of summer according to East Asian calendars. And ancestors believe after Soman, it starts to feel more like summer. And it will surely feel like summer in the afternoon, but those in the eastern regions, including Daegu and Pohang, will have cooler than average temperatures due to easterly winds. And for other regions, Seoul will get up to 24 degrees, Gwangju hitting 25, while Gyeongju will make it to 21 degrees with very high UV rays across the nation today. Now tomorrow is Buddha's birthday, which is a national holiday here in Korea, and we have rain in the forecast tomorrow evening, which will linger into Wednesday. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world. So South Korea has mostly sunny skies and good air today, and North Korea will also have summer-like weather under bright skies. And over in Beijing, expect steady rain early on, followed by clouds with a few showers today. Perth is on track for the driest autumn on record, but there's some welcome rain on the way on Thursday and on Friday. Vancouver had cloudy skies with some showers on Sunday, but the sun should return for the first half of the coming week. As for South America, most cities on the map will be under mainly sunny skies on Monday. Taking you to Europe, Rome and Paris will see rain for the start of the week, so have an umbrella handy. Lastly, to Africa, good news for those in Cape Town. Expect a few days of much-needed rain this week. And that's all the weather update for now.
Now that's all the time we have at this hour on Arirang News. Thank you for watching and have a great start of your day and the week ahead.
K-Beauty Talk.